Welcome back to another episode of DSC's Charity Questions podcast. And today we've got Janine Booth from Red in the Spectrum joining us. And I first met Janine last year at DSC's Staff Day, and I had to get her on the podcast because we were hugely inspired about her mission to talk to many organizations of different sizes, trade unions, about neurodiversity and in particular neurodiversity in the workplace as well, Janine. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Nice. And it's a cold January at the moment. We're recording this just as the kind of second week back, aren't we? So we're fresh into it this year.
It's very freezing, and I'm in flood-wrecked Leicestershire.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Well, staying snuggled inside my house for this.
Nice. And if you can see the video, if you're watching the video, you can see Janine's got her lovely Red in the Spectrum logo behind her on the video as well. Nice, Janine. So tell our listeners then, I know what it is. I've obviously seen you speak, but what is Red in the Spectrum, your organization, Janine?
So Red in the Spectrum is it is about empowering organisations to harness neurodiversity. Mm-hmm. So all of that needs unpicking and explaining, doesn't it? So first of all, what's neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is short for neurological diversity. It's a term that was coined in 1998 by Judy Singer, who was an Australian autistic activist, and she based it on the idea of biodiversity. She said, look, it's the late 20th century. Human society is finally getting grips with the fact that we share the planet with lots of other species, that they interact with each other, that's a good thing, and that perhaps it's about time we stop stomping around the planet trying to eliminate it and started appreciating it and protecting it, etc. And she said, let's apply that same principle to the naturally occurring variation in human brain structure. And accept that human society consists of individuals whose brains are structured differently from each other, that having individuals who are different from each other is a good thing, and that instead of stomping around the planet trying to eliminate it, it's time to value it and protect it and appreciate it. And so she coined the term neurodiversity, which is short for neurological diversity, and since then it's taken off, spread around the world like the proverbial Australian wildfire, because it struck a chord with so many of us who might be, say, autistic or ADHD or dyslexic or whatever, and are sick of being told that we're broken, told that there's something wrong with us, when what we want to say is, well, actually, we just think differently from how you do.
Exactly. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And if you've got a team of people working on something and they all come at it from a slightly different angle, you're going to get much better results, aren't you?
Exactly.
And yet we live in a society that makes it very difficult for people who are not neurotypical. The brain isn't structured in the most common or predominant way.
I like that. Neurotypical is good language, isn't it? And I think
well, do you know what? Neurotypical, it just means that's the brain structure that we think is the most common one in the world.
So we think as well. Yeah, exactly.
Apologies to any neurotypicals listening to the podcast that no one has as yet come up with a more descriptive or interesting name for your brain type. And until they do, unfortunately, you're just common.
Yeah, we're not that cool, are we? Yeah, I like that a lot. So I'm already inspired. This is why I knew you'd be a great guest, Janine, and I'm sure you've got some listeners' ears peeking up at this topic. So, I mean, I'm inspired and I can see where your inspiration comes from, but then this has led to you creating Red in the Spectrum. Any personal experiences that kind of led to this as well?
Yeah, so you're going to get a bit of my life story now, but it is relevant.
Let's go.
So I have 3 sons who are, at the time we're recording this, 25, 22 and 20. It'll be probably be different by the time it's broadcast because it's my middle lad's birthday on Wednesday.
Nice.
Oh, that's tomorrow.
Yes.
Anyway, so my middle lad, Joe, just before he was 5, he was diagnosed as being autistic. And me and his dad, my ex, we had no idea what that meant. So we went on this learning journey, learning about autism, and the more we learned, the more little lights started going off in my own head, until in 2012, at the age of 45, I was I like to say identified rather than diagnosed.
I like that.
I was identified as being autistic, and for the first time my life made sense, and it explained why I'd always felt a bit different. It's It's like being short-sighted your whole life and finally getting a pair of glasses. So you finally find out who you are. Anyway, at that point, I was on the national executive of the RMT, the Rail Maritime Transport Workers Union.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, well, look, more and more people are talking about autism these days. More and more people are talking about neurodiversity more broadly. But they're mostly talking about it as a children's issue. Or as a medical issue, or as a school issue. They're not really talking about it as an issue for grown-ups, or an issue. I mean, I don't know what they think neurodivergent kids grow into, but there you go.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and they're not really talking about it in terms of workplaces or campaigning or movement for trade unions, etc. So I started developing and delivering training for trade unionists about, first of all, about autism, and then about neurodiversity more broadly. And then, so at the time I was working, my proper job was I was station supervisor on London Underground. I did that for more than 26 years.
Wow. And
then the year before last, I just basically realised that I couldn't really do that job anymore. A bit old and creaky.
Tough job.
And so I left that job and I started doing the training stuff full time.
Yes.
Expanded beyond trade unions, working now with charities, with local authorities, even the occasional private company. And yeah,
they're learning, Janine.
Red in the Spectrum was born.
Yes.
And we don't even just do training, actually. We can provide speakers. We're doing, one thing we're starting this year is the neurodiversity audit. Come on, audit your university, audit your organisation about how neuro-inclusive it is.
Wow.
And that'll mean looking at your publications to see how dyslexia-friendly they are, looking at your events to see how, to see what the sensory environment is like.
Exactly.
All sorts of aspects, including stuff you might never even have thought of. And yeah, we could do that, an audit as in-depth as the particular organisation wants to or can afford to. And end up giving you a plan about how to become more neuro-inclusive, which is going to make you stronger in the long run, isn't it? Because the more people you involve, the more you're going to be able to achieve.
Exactly. And if we can bring people closer to the work that they enjoy and the work that they're able to do in the way that suits them, we're going to have more purpose, we're going to have less people leaving, we're going to have more people engaged, and these things. Yes, there may be an element of cost, maybe bringing in Red in the Spectrum and learning, but actually once you've addressed this stuff, most of this stuff is free and just about dealing with people.
And we are also very cheap compared with everyone else.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. And I'm sure, again, that's perking the ears up of the charity people listening to this, so we'll definitely give you the jumping off board to go and find out more about Janine at the end of this podcast. So you're talking about how it's evolving now since its inception. And did you say that you've only been doing this a couple of years, the training side of it?
No, I've been doing the training since 2012.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
But kind of branded it as Red in the Spectrum when I left London Underground a year and a half ago.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. So I didn't know that. I thought that's kind of, it's come
and now
such
there's
a long
other
way.
people involved doing some of the research for us, doing
for
us, all that kind of stuff.
No, you're flying, Janine. It looks really impressive. I've got to ask you then, what stations did you work at? I'm in Camden myself.
Most of them. The very first and the very last station I worked at was Oxford Circus.
No, crikey.
But over the years in between that, loads and loads of dozens of different stations.
Oxford Circus, you're asking me like what?
For quite a while, which is like Bank's not a station; it's an underground city.
Yes, yeah. It takes 20 minutes to get to Monument. Somehow you end up there underground. Yeah, that's amazing. So you pick the busiest stations then, no relaxed ones.
Yeah.
No chalk farms or anything.
I did do places like Oakwood and Fosters and Northolt. It's all
Nice. Norfolk, yeah, cool. Okay. Lovely. So you're evolving. Red in the Spectrum is evolving. We're all evolving, aren't we? I guess on a deeper level. I would love to hear a success story, Janine, or a moment that kind of made you proud of where you've come with Red in the Spectrum.
I think one of my proudest moments actually was when I ran a residential. So I run the neurodiversity training program for the Fire Brigades Union.
Good.
And we do 3-day residential courses for their reps and activists, which is great.
Yeah.
And at the end of one of them, one of the reps who'd been on the course came up to me and said, "Thank you." He said, "I'm dyslexic and I've spent my whole life thinking I'm thick. And this week I found out that I'm not." And that was amazing. And then after the next FBU
Wow.
course, another rep came up to me and said that she had saved 3 firefighters' jobs using the knowledge she'd learned on the previous course.
Wow.
So
Wow.
those are a couple of things I'm pretty proud of. Yeah.
Janine, I'm blessed to do this work, and I'm blessed to interview amazing people, and lots of people come on here and give me chills from the things they say, and I think that's definitely one of those examples, and both of those are so powerful, aren't they? You've given someone an identity, maybe similar to what you did for someone did for you, Janine, all those years ago, and I imagine that it's quite a powerful experience to see yourself slightly differently, but to save jobs as well, so people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also benefit the firefighters, because now we've got a different neurodiversity of individuals working here, and maybe we can approach things in different ways. Powerful stuff. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it, really, in terms of where we're going to go with these conversations. So you must tackle this, obviously have a lot of organizations that bring you in, they're really engaged, but actually I imagine I'm putting words in, but there's probably still a little bit of defensive or a bit of misunderstanding from people as well.
Yeah, the biggest shift I have to try to work on with people, right, is pretty much every time I run a course or talk to an organization, what people want to know is, what reasonable adjustments can we make?
Yeah.
What reasonable adjustments can we make for individuals? And I want to challenge that. And what I say to them is, look, I want you to think of reasonable adjustments for individuals as plan B. Plan A is an accessible job, an accessible organization. You actually want to get to the point with your organization where nobody needs a reasonable adjustment because it's accessible. So, for instance, if you worked in an office and the only way in was 3 steps up to the front door, okay, and say you were the management, or say you a union rep who went to the management, and you said, we really need to put a ramp in, right? And the top boss said, "Now we'll do that as a reasonable adjustment if and when a wheelchair user works here." You just wouldn't accept that, would you?
Exactly.
That just wouldn't be acceptable. And we need that to be the same for everything. So, for example, there are some ways of laying out printed materials that are more dyslexia friendly than others. Okay? If you want to find out what they are in detail, then Google. Other search engines are available.
DuckDuckGo.
Google British Dyslexia Association style guide, and that'll have all the details. Okay, but what we don't want is organisations to go, oh, okay then. When one of our people tells us they're dyslexic, then we'll produce a version in that layout. Just produce everything in that layout.
Exactly.
Then you won't have to go to the trouble of doing a separate one for someone. You won't be highlighting them and making them look different. And you won't be relying on them knowing that they're dyslexic. So
and having the confidence to talk about it.
It's not even all neurodivergent people know they're neurodivergent.
Exactly.
I didn't know for 45 years. I wouldn't have asked for reasonable adjustments because wouldn't have known where to start. Wouldn't have crossed my mind.
Yeah, and you said something that really stayed with me, Janine, and I don't know if you said it off the cuff, but about constellations.
Oh, the spectrum. Okay, yeah, so the spectrum is in our names, it's red in the spectrum. The reason we're called red in the spectrum is we're a bit sorry, I'm going to go.
No, let's go this tangent because it's relevant. Red in the spectrum. Let's go.
And then we're going to come back to what you just asked me, by which time I'll probably have forgotten what you just asked me. So
I'll keep you on it. We're good.
But red in the spectrum. So spectrum, like I think most people know now that autism, other neurodivergent conditions are spectrums. They present differently in different people. And the spectrum, of course, is a range of colours. So we are red in the spectrum because the red represents our passion, and it represents leftiness as well. I mean, there are neurodiversity organisations out there that will teach you all about how to, well, I mean, this is a bit rude, but how to exploit neurodivergent people at work more effectively. You know,
I'll let you say that,
etc. There's this notion going around called the competitive advantage, which is about how it makes your company more competitive to hire autistic people and stuff like that. And it kind of that's not us. That's if you want some training in that, don't come to us.
Yeah, of course.
Go somewhere else, because we don't think that a neurodivergent person's work is their worth. We don't think people's rights are dependent on their productivity.
Exactly.
So that's where the red in the spectrum bit comes on. And I've remembered what you asked me. It was about the spectrum.
Yes.
So a lot of people know now that autism and other forms of neurodivergence are the spectrum.
You hear that thrown around as well. People say that spectrum word a lot.
They do, and in a way, not in a good way, actually.
Yeah.
Because some people say, "Oh, he's on the spectrum," as though they can't possibly say he's autistic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a euphemism, and I don't really like. It's almost like
I don't. Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yes.
But the important thing about the spectrum is it's not a straight line from mild to severe. Okay,
Exactly.
It's not. You'll hear people use phrases like mildly autistic and severely autistic, and that's not helpful. It's much more multi-dimensional than that.
Absolutely.
Which is when I mentioned at your event that there's an autistic activist who suggested we call it a constellation.
Which I love.
On the spectrum, because it's much more multi-dimensional, and of course it is full of stars.
Yeah, and dynamic and personal as well. There's endless opportunities.
And a thing that's linked to this is people using phrases like high functioning and low functioning. And that's not very helpful. Partly, you occasionally hear parents say, "Oh, my son's autistic, but he's high functioning." As
you make me laugh.
It's almost like saying, "My son's autistic, but he's not one of the stupid ones," which is not helpful. But actually, a whole person is pretty much never either high functioning or low functioning. Because people can be, autistic people in particular, tend to have what we call a spiky functional profile. Simultaneously high functioning at some things and low functioning at other things, or high functioning at something on one day and not on another day. To use a particularly cliched autistic stereotype, say you're brilliant at maths.
Yes.
You're a total maths nerd, to the extent that you're a professor at a university. But you can't get out of bed and get to work on time to deliver your lectures without someone to help you do it. So, high functioning or low functioning?
Exactly. Both.
The whole person is neither, are they?
Yeah, they're neither, both.
And low functioning something else. And the problem is, if we call people low functioning, then we overlook their strengths and abilities. We call them high functioning, then we overlook their needs.
Exactly. Yeah,
best to think of people in terms of their individual profiles and needs.
We do this a lot, don't we? We try to profile people, and people would call me an extrovert, I'm sure. But if you took me to a painting class or a drumming class, I'd be hiding in the corner trying not to show my painting, and I wouldn't be an extrovert. It's not my skill set. So we have to think about it from a broader perspective. And I like that misconception. And I think language is crucial in many places. Are there any other misconceptions that you kind of tackle head on as Read in the Spectrum? Let's go.
There's loads of stereotypes. There's loads of, I wouldn't know where to start on this, to be honest, but let's just give an example. Oh yeah, please, Tourette's. Yeah. Tourette's. Most people think people with Tourette's, they're the ones who can't help swearing all the time. So swearing tics, the proper name for that, by the way, is coprolalia. That means swearing tics. Only about 10 to 15% of people with Tourette's do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other people with Tourette's have other different kind of tics. It might be motor tics, or it might be vocal tics, which might be swearing, but it might be grunting or saying a particular word over and over again. Can I go off on a tangent and tell the story of Madame de Dampierre?
I would love that. Let's go.
Madame de Dampierre. So Madame de Dampierre was one of the first recorded cases of what later became known as Tourette's syndrome. And she was in Paris 200 years ago. And modern kind of neurology France led the way in modern neurology. By the way, since I came to your event, I found out one of the reasons why that was. Right, and mainly it's good for kind of modern developed country, but it's also because they had lots of heads to study because of the revolution chopping them off people.
Oh my gosh!
Can you believe it?
I kind of can. That's really bad, isn't it?
They were able to investigate brains because they had a lot of them available to them. Anyway, Madame de Dampierre was a French aristocrat.
Oh,
and she had what we would now call coprolalia, swearing tics.
Yes.
And medical notes, her medical records for the whole of the 19th century, for a whole lifespan, survive. And it's really interesting reading them because they're all at different times of her life. And they're written by different doctors, but they all make the same observation. And the observation they make is that her swearing tics, her vulgar outbursts, are in marked contrast with the lady's social standing. So what's been going on here is what you've got to imagine is this French aristocrat sitting in her boudoir effing and jeffing, and the doctors are going, well, ladies don't behave like that. Must be something wrong with her.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, probably half a mile down the road at the local market, there's a shed load of working class and peasant women effing and jeffing their heads off.
Exactly.
And no one's diagnosing them with anything.
Yeah.
Because that's just how the great unwashed behave. And I love the story of Madame de Dampierre because I think it illustrates beautifully that for all the time, since the beginning of when human society started investigating how our brains work, which is about 200 years ago, it has always been a class issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is all these various neurotypes that I've mentioned, Tourette's, autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, etc.
Yep.
There's no physical test for any of them.
Can't
do a blood test or brain scan, shows you whether you've got one of these things.
Yeah.
So they're all diagnosed on the basis of observed behaviours. And the way our society judges people's behaviours doesn't judge everyone's behaviour by the same yardsticks.
It's subjective, exactly, yeah.
It has different yardsticks based on different demographics, the main one of which is class. There's others as well, for instance, gender. So Madame de Dampierre's doctors thought the cure for her swearing tics would be to get married.
Sounds very sensible.
They were sadly disappointed
straight away.
Yeah, I like to think she swore more when she got married, but I don't
imagine she did.
Have any evidence for that. It's just speculation.
Maybe just some more severe choice words when she did swear.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And I think it's what a history there in terms of how far we've come, really. And you're right, it's so class and gender based. And I really like the message about let's not wait to do an appropriate change for someone. Let's get ahead of that and let's think ahead of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's one bit of advice I'd give to any organisation, it's don't. Please. I think people tend to think, okay, so let's learn about neurodiversity so that when someone here tells us, their ADHD or the dyscalculia, whatever, then we know what adjustments to make for them. And my main bit of advice would be, no, don't wait for that. Think now how you can make your workplace more neuro-inclusive.
Absolutely.
Start using dyslexia-friendly print layout now.
Exactly.
Get rid of your fluorescent lights in your office and replace them with dimmable full-spectrum lighting. Because it's less grating to people with sensory sensitivities.
Absolutely.
And you know what? All of these measures, they'll all make your workplace or your organisation's premises or whatever, they'll all make them better for everyone. Or at least neutral. There's nothing I found that you can do that makes your organisation more neuro-inclusive, which then makes it more unpleasant for neurotypical people.
I mean, I talk a lot about lighting and like this kind of sick home situation we're in, and fluo is really bad for us generally. It's just maybe some people manifest the sensitivity a little bit higher than others, right? But you're right. We make these changes, and potentially passively, others are also then recognizing the benefit. So I like the dyslexia guide. It was British Dyslexia, wasn't it? The style sheet.
British Dyslexia
Association style guide. Any other kind of, I know it's not a quick win, but any kind of other things like that are on top of your head to shout out while we're here?
No, I mean, I send people in the direction of that one.
Yeah.
Quite a lot. A lot of the charity websites are good for things like that.
Yeah.
The resources, nice. I would say if you're looking for useful websites, then don't just stick with the kind of national charity ones. Look at the blogs written by neurodivergent people. Because the charity ones, I tend to think, are good for information.
Yes.
But they're not speaking on behalf of neurodivergent people.
Yeah, exactly.
They're speaking about neurodivergent people.
Yeah. I like that.
And of course, check out the Red in the Spectrum website, because we've got loads of. It's not just adverts for our courses. There's all sorts of blog articles about.
I think that's how we found you, to be fair, Janine, for your articles.
This is how you found me, yeah.
So you mentioned
I've got very good webmasters. You see, everyone who who's involved in Red in the Spectrum, is neurodivergent. Okay, so our web chap is autistic, and he is absolutely brilliantly hyper-focused on SEO,
search engine optimization.
Yeah, search engine optimization.
Cool.
So that means that people like you find me because he's an SEO there.
What a guy! Yeah, no, that's everybody needs an SEO guy these days. Yeah, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. It's the world we live in, isn't it? So you mentioned the accreditation system. I think that sounds really sensible, giving people kind of objective, getting that opportunity to work a little bit deeper with organizations, see a little bit about their processes potentially, maybe not just conversations with the staff.
Yeah.
So that sounds really powerful. And is that kind of good to go now if people can come and do that straight away?
Yeah, that's good to go now. If people want that, if you want, and again, it can be depending on what your resources are or whatever, you can have a quick overview or you can have a more in-depth one, just geared to how to what your organization's capacities are, I guess.
I like it. Any more visions for the future in terms of where you want Red in the Spectrum to be?
Ooh, honestly, I don't let myself dream of it being this massive organisation. No, it's an organisation, but I see it as being part of a movement as well.
Yeah, me too.
And it's absolutely not about doing things for you. It's about empowering you to make the changes yourselves.
Yeah, and look, the movement is bigger than Red in the Spectrum, and you're a small part of it. But you're right. If we can keep the movement going in the right direction with a little bit of a snowball effect, maybe get some similar organisations doing the same work at the same level as you, which there is a little already, of course, Janine. But I think
the important thing is for neurodivergent people to be in the leadership of this work.
It's very true,
because it is a long-held important slogan of the disabled people's movement. Nothing about us without us.
I was about to say it.
And I think that's important for all marginalised groups that are fighting against discrimination, etc. It's particularly important for disabled people because we are so used to being talked about and talked over. And there was the phenomenon called "Does he have sugar in his tea?" Which is based around a scenario where two people go into a cafe. One of them's a wheelchair user, one of them isn't. And they order cups of tea, and then the person delivering the tea says to the person who's not the wheelchair user, "Does he take sugar?" Like, why didn't you ask him yourself? And so people get talked over a lot in the sense that they think because if you're different in one way, then you're totally incapable of anything. And in particular, you're incapable of talking for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the leading autism charity in America. It's called Autism Speaks. Why it calls itself Autism Speaks, I do not know, because it doesn't allow autistic people to speak.
Yeah.
It's an extremely patronising, cure-driven, pathologising organisation. Autistic activists picket their events,
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when these kind of charities end up with this sort of like figurehead of actually the opposite of what their name dictates, and whether they were ever a feeling of support, they probably never were. They probably always had this kind of approach that has obviously been proven to be misstated and fundamentally wrong, but they got the funding from the people that matters, unfortunately, for those sorts of projects. And this is why it's so important what the work you do, and obviously wanted to get you on to talk about this. And I'm sure lots of our listeners incredibly resonate with what you're saying, and probably come with their own stories about how they've experienced it within their workplaces as well. And I think you said nothing about us without us is very true for all charities and all kind of fundraising when it comes to beneficiaries. And I also love one of the habits of highly effective people to understand before you can be understood. Let's not assume that somebody is in a certain position because of something we've seen or heard. Let's actually just ask and treat people like a normal person, and let's adapt it. Yeah, let's try and understand it exactly. Even though we're not as us neurotypicals, we're not as fortunate as you guys in being able to think about things slightly differently. We're a little bit on the other side of things, aren't we? But
seeing things slightly differently and doing a range of activities. We even do a thing called neurodiverse. That's emphasis on the verse, which is poetry. So if your charity is having an event, for instance, and you want some entertainment, you think, I know, let's get some neurodivergent poets. Then give us a call. We can sort them out. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm a bit of a side hustle as a poet, and I know loads of neurodivergent poets.
Let's go. This is so good. So we've got our accreditations, we've got our poetry, we've got our training, and we've got obviously Janine as a speaker as well, which I can't recommend enough. So
and other speakers as well.
Absolutely, yes, of course.
So my son Joe, who I mentioned before,
who's
23 tomorrow. He's
happy birthday.
You'll see on my I think it is on the it's on the Red in the Spectrum website and on my personal YouTube.
Yes.
Some interviews I've done with him because he speaks really articulately about his experience as an autistic young man. So there's a bit about leisure centres, sports and leisure, what it's like for autistic people, what barriers you face to get involved in sports and leisure. There's one about his time in education, etc. So,
wow, that's really good. And look, it's all
so we can get if you don't want me, whatever not. If you don't want me, there's a range of speakers that we can arrange for you.
Nice. And so we did this as part of our staff day. It was in the session. We always try and have a session, like a learning session. Sometimes we've had people teach us sign language. And of course, you came in for us, Janine, last year, and you left a lasting memory. So I think it's always worth, if you are having an event like that, to bring in a speaker like Janine or as Joe or obviously anyone else as part of Red in the Spectrum, to just give that little bit of thought provoke. And also in terms of how we deal with our beneficiaries, right? Nothing about them without them. Maybe this will help us in some way to be in the shoes of another human being a little bit more effectively, which of course can only empower our missions. So people want to do a similar session with you to what we had, or they want to do anything, Janine, give us your website. I didn't know you were on YouTube, so give us your social handles as well.
www.redinthespectrum.co.uk. There is
Easy
a lot
peasy.
of information there.
Yep.
And there's also a contact form on there.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you wanted to email directly, then email info@redinthespectrum.co.uk.
Cool.
The YouTube channel I mentioned is my personal one. So that's youtube.com/Janine Booth.
Nice.
There's also there's playlists on there about autism and neurodiversity, but there's also lots of poetry and anti-speeches and some little doodly videos and all sorts of.
I'll give you a subscribe after this.
Random stuff. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, amazing. So good. Thank you, Janine. And we've still got you for a few more minutes. Anything you want to share to the listeners while you're here?
Oh, I don't know.
Don't get your head chopped off by the French.
Already, haven't I?
No, you've nailed it, Janine. We're happy. We're all good. So it's redinthespectrum.co.uk, info@redinthespectrum.co.uk, or Janine Booth on YouTube. Thank you so much, Janine. Honestly, it really left a lasting impression on many of us at DSC, and I'll definitely be taking your stories and your learnings from you as I go forward in my career, and absolutely shouting about Red in the Spectrum, because I think it's a powerful message you bring, and the movement is taking over, isn't it? So maybe one day, Janine, you get to sit back and just watch the movement take over without you. But for now, we're fighting the good fight. DSC are here to help if we can.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Janine.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Charity Questions podcast, brought to you by the Directory of Social Change. DSC provides training courses, publications, online funding databases, research, conferences, and lots of free resources just like this to the charity sector. If you want to get more involved with this podcast, follow us along on social media, where we announce the guests we have upcoming, and you can contribute your own questions for me to ask on the podcast. Thanks again for listening.